Pardon me, is that the Chattanooga Choo-Choo? Why, yes, it is. Terminal Station, now known as the Chattanooga Choo-Choo Hotel, is an iconic monument to Chattanooga's historic roots in the transportation industry. First built in 1906 and displaying much of the original exterior architectural features, the station has long served as an essential pillar in the city's historic and cultural identity. While its main purpose has changed over its 114-year history, it still serves as a public place available for Chattanoogans and visitors to enjoy. Be sure to visit next time you're in town.
Hello, friends. Guten Tag, boa tarde, bienvenidos, bienvenue. Welcome, everyone, on behalf of Humanities Tennessee. If you are watching on Facebook Live or YouTube and want to ask questions during this session, you will need to either download the festival app or visit the streaming site via the link at www.humtn.org/SFB. The official festival bookseller is the fabulous Parnassus Books. Humanities Tennessee staff will place the book buy links at the top of the chat. All book purchases made via Parnassus help to keep this festival free. And this festival is a free nonprofit event that is supported in part by donations from individuals. If you appreciate this event and want to add your support, you can do so by visiting www.humtn.org. Festival staff will be posting the link to the donate page as well. Folks in the chat, please be kind. Anyone making inappropriate comments will be removed. I have a brute squad. I am your host, New York Times bestselling author, Saturday songwriter, and storm chaser, Alethea Contis. I am a huge fan of Southern Festival of Books. I volunteered every year that I lived in Tennessee, and now that I don't live in Tennessee, it's a lot harder to volunteer. Welcome 2020. So here I am honored to be here, and I am honored to introduce today's author, Christopher Paolini.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, I'm gonna read your intro. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
It's very sexy. Okay. Christopher was born in Southern California and has lived most of his life in Paradise Valley, Montana. He published his first novel, Eragon, in 2003 and quickly became a publishing phenomenon. To Sleep in a Sea of Stars is his first adult novel. The epic story follows Kira Navarez, who, during a routine survey mission on an uncolonized planet, finds an alien relic that thrusts her into the wonders and the nightmares of first contact. High-stakes space battles for the fate of humanity take her to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, transforming not only Kira herself, but the entire course of history as well. Dun, dun, dun.
Do you just want to read all of my promotional materials from now on?
The book is so much fun. I have it here. Hold on. I have it here on my Kindle right here because it's great. I love that it's a book with a blue cover because I worked in a bookstore. We all have to have books with blue covers.
Yeah, and it seems to be a trend with me, given that Eragon, my first novel, had a blue cover. So blue seems to be a lucky color for me. It's also my favorite color.
Oh, that's wonderful. See, that wasn't even on my list of questions. Well done. I appreciate that.
The blue that I consider my favorite color is, I'm told it's actually purple. Since I'm partially red-green colorblind, what most people see as purple, I see as the most gorgeous shade of blue.
Ooh, only to see what you see would be a beautiful, beautiful thing. Okay, so I have to ask the first question, which I'm sure you have answered 7,000 times. Let's chat a little bit about the challenges of writing science fiction after having written an epic fantasy series?
I think it depends on the type of science fiction you're writing. If you're not particularly concerned with adhering to any sort of realistic physics, then you can write whatever you want in science fiction as you can in fantasy. To me, though, since I did want to adhere to somewhat realistic physics and I didn't want to break physics as we know it, I was okay with bending it in a few places, but I didn't want to break it. Then that does impose certain restrictions because you need to do your research, and you need to do your homework and make sure you're not doing stuff that just doesn't make sense. So that was a difference. I think the other big differences for me were getting to use a modern vocabulary, which again is not a prerequisite of science fiction, but in my case, since it's in the real world and the future, I wanted to use a more modern vocabulary. And coming from fantasy, that was a nice change. And then not really physics, but technology, in the sense that if you need to go from point A to point B a little bit faster in a fantasy novel, you can always say that, oh, hey, the characters ran a little harder. They pushed themselves a little harder. You can't really do that with a spaceship. There is a hard limit on what technology can do, and that limit imposes certain restrictions on the storytelling, the logistics of moving around, which is fine. It's not a bad thing. But it is definitely a different thing.
That's fascinating. Okay, so because obviously you had to do a ton of world building for this, and my question now is this a standalone novel? Was it always meant to be a standalone novel?
Yes and no. So To Sleep is the first book in what I'm calling the Fractalverse. And in fact, I am wearing the Fractalverse logo on this pin, if you can see that. And shameless self-promotion, this pin is available in my Etsy store, and actually Badali Jewelry, which does beautiful pieces for like Sanderson and Rothfuss and other amazing authors and properties. They've done some beautiful pendants.
What is the name of your Etsy store again?
I don't know actually. I think it's just Paolini or Paolini Official. I'll have to look that up. But if you search for Paolini, it's the first thing that comes up on Etsy.
Perfect.
So Badali has some beautiful pendants. One's in brass with like this galaxy swirl, and one's in silver. But anyway, to answer your question, the whole point of the Fractalverse was to create a setting that I could tell stories for the rest of my life in. And the Fractalverse encompasses the real world, the distant past, the far future, and it does have some differences from the real world. Some physics differences. We know there are certain aliens in this universe, but it's a playground, and it's something I did spend a huge amount of time doing research for. Oh, and also, if you get the hardcover of the book, not only is these beautiful end papers. Let's see if I can hold this up proper. But on the cover of the book, we actually have the logo embossed also.
Pretty.
Yeah, shiny. So that's the idea with the Fractalverse. So if I'm writing something that's not explicitly fantasy, it'll probably be in the Fractalverse. Yeah. And the reason I did that was I spent so much time world building for the Inheritance cycle. I loved doing that, and I loved how the world just kept getting richer and richer the longer I worked with it. So it was like, I don't want to just do all of this for one novel. I want to create a setting where I can keep adding to it over the years. So we will see some of the characters from To Sleep in the Sea of Stars again. We will see some of the storylines continued, but the story I wanted to tell ends in this book, and it's a complete story in one book, which was very important to me to write after having done series work in the past.
So do you think will you be splitting into like short stories or just novels or whatever?
All of it. There's really no restriction here. So, and I do like short stories. It's something I've been doing more of recently. I had actually published a collection of them last year. And I've done a short sequel novella to Sleep already. Knocked that out in a week. And I'm currently working on a short prequel novel, which I wrote back in 2013, and I wasn't very happy with it. So I'm revising it now, and very happy with how the revisions are going. So that should be done in another month or two.
Super exciting. So, okay, obvious follow-up question is writing novels versus writing short stories. Most people want to know what are your personal challenges and which you prefer.
I mean, I like long form storytelling. Anyone who's picked up this book is going to know that. I like big stories, but And it also depends, if you're shifting short stories, though, it depends on the length of the short story. I mean, you can write a short story that's a page and a half or a page, and if you're doing that, it's not really a story so much as it is a snapshot, an image, a mood. I mean, it could be a complete story. I mean, you could be very, you could tell an awful lot, or you can show a couple of ups and downs very quickly. So it's not impossible. But in general, very, very short stories tend to be just a bit of a mood, a bit of an image, a bit of a feeling. But you can go longer. I mean, and then you have the room to actually tell a complete story. A lot of times when I approach a short story, I think of it almost as if I'm writing a chapter in a book that doesn't exist, because I tend to structure my chapters as miniature stories. And so that is actually what first gave me the confidence to start tackling short stories.
Nice. Very nice. Okay, so back to the science fiction world. When you read science fiction books and watch the movies, I feel like all of them want you to take away something, they're very thought-provoking. So if someone can take something away from your book, what would you want them to think about after they read your book?
Well, I don't necessarily want to tell people what they should be thinking about, but I'll tell people what I was thinking about in working on this. It's like I'm going to turn up the brightness on my screen here because my computer is doing weird things. Okay, there we go. So the first thing would be a sense of hope and optimism. I am ultimately an optimistic person, an optimistic writer. I'll throw lots and lots of tough stuff at my characters, but I don't want people to come away depressed from my stories. I've heard from too many people over the years who were, found my earlier novels helpful in some regard in the course of their lives. And that means an awful lot to me. And I would hate to have the opposite effect on someone. Life is hard enough. Putting out negative things seems to me not only irresponsible, but immoral. And again, it's not that you can't write a tragedy. It's not that you can't write something dark and intense. You certainly can, and I wouldn't discourage people from doing it. But there is a line where something can become actively harmful, and that's where I don't want to go. So a sense of hope and optimism. A large part of the story for me was dealing with the question of how you react mentally, physically, emotionally, when your body is no longer your own and doesn't behave the way you want it. And not just for my main character, but a lot of the side characters too deal with issues like that. And that was very important to me to write about. And also questions of, your relationship between the individual and the society. What is your responsibility to society when society maybe doesn't care about you as an individual? And also in the future, as technology becomes increasingly incorporated into our actual bodies, if your smartphone is embedded in your head, how can you separate yourself and maintain a sense of individuality when you're constantly connected with other people? You're part of this super organism, essentially. So those were all things that interested in me, and quite a few more actually, in writing the book. But ultimately, when people reach that last page, the last scene, the last paragraph, the last line, I would hope they walk away with that sense of optimism, maybe a sense of awe and wonder over the size of the universe, a tingle down their spine, and a bit of a bittersweet ache that the story has ended, and that has ended in the way it has.
Oh, beautiful. Excellent. Excellent. What are some optimistic books that you've read that maybe inspired you personally?
Ooh, I mean, this is a cliched answer, and it's not a book answer, but when I think of optimism in sci-fi, I think of original series Star Trek, and I think of next generation Star Trek. There was certainly perhaps some, it was overly optimistic in some ways that doesn't actually make sense with human behavior, but it does not hurt to have that vision of what could be. It gives us something to shoot for. And we've even seen things, like cell phones were directly inspired by the old flip communicators that they had on Star Trek. So, what you put out there can certainly influence how people react. And also, I think a lot of the classic Golden Age sci-fi, Heinlein, Andre Norton, Asimov, Clarke, Anne McCaffrey, there was a real gung-ho sense of we can do this. It's and humanity can accomplish amazing things. And I think it's a pity that sensibility has fallen to the wayside a bit at the moment.
It is a bit. Star Trek definitely was a utopia of sorts.
Yes, and modern Star Trek is not.
No.
And that's not to say, again, that's not to downplay any, the qualities of modern Star Trek. It's just, it's different, and there is something I do miss.
I agree. Okay, now personally, I want to know, what do you do to maintain optimism in your own life? Like, what do you surround yourself with to keep yourself happy? Because I feel like that's super important this year.
Yes, and it's also very important just as a writer, because writing is a schizophrenic profession in several ways. I mean, one big way is that you spend most of your time alone, and then every once in a while, if you are lucky, your publisher kicks you out the front door and makes you go stand in front of lots and lots of people and talk in public. So that's a weird split. The other weird thing is that the other schizophrenic thing is that you have to maintain enormous levels of confidence when writing a story. You have to believe that you are writing the greatest piece of English literature that's ever been composed when you're working on a story. I mean, and I'm exaggerating slightly, but you do need to maintain that sense of optimism and confidence, because otherwise the self-doubts will just get in the way and you won't produce. But on the flip side, when it comes to editing and revision, you have to go in thinking, I just produced the worst piece of English literature in the history of this planet. How can I make it better? And yet, even when you do that, you can't be crushed by the thought that, it's not good, it can be better. You still have to maintain the confidence that I can make it better. And I'm going to make it better. And gosh darn it, people are going to like it. And even if they don't like it, I'm going to write something new that they will like. So how do you do all of that? I think, and then of course, applying that to the larger world, I think that surrounding yourself by positive things, not imbibing, whether through text or other media, negative things. And that's very hard to do in today's environment. When I was homeschooled and growing up in rural Montana, which is where I still live, I did not have a whole lot of contact with the outer world. I was not reading newspapers. The internet was not what it is now. There was no social media. And it really had I had a very different attitude toward life then, because yes, maybe lots of bad things were happening, but it didn't necessarily affect my day-to-day life. And so why worry about it? I think that ultimately you have to decide what you can handle mentally. So there are a lot of things I don't pay attention to. I'm a huge political junkie. I don't talk about politics in public because that's not a polite thing to do. I'm a huge political junkie, but I don't let it affect me personally, because it'll tear you apart otherwise. I realize I'm not necessarily giving any concrete solutions here, because I think it's personal. I know some authors who will block anyone or mute anyone on, let's say, Twitter, who says anything negative about their books. And it's not because they're not open to criticism. It's not because they're not open to editing. It's because they only want that from people they trust, that they're psychologically okay with. And just getting random stuff from random people is not necessarily helpful. And art is so subjective. What one person hates, the next person's going to love. So if you open yourself up to that and try to please everyone, you'll end up pleasing no one, and you'll be miserable in the meantime.
So true.
I mean, this is something we could talk about for quite a long time, honestly, because I think, with the technology right now has made all of this worse. You can pick any book in the world, greatest writers you think that someone you think is the greatest writer ever, and someone's going to hate them. So I maintain my optimism by focusing on the things I want to accomplish and putting all of my energy into that, and focusing on the daily habits that allow me to function as a healthy human being. So that would be exercise, that would be spending time with my family, my friends. It would be producing on a consistent basis, because that makes me happy in terms of telling stories. And then the rest of it you just don't focus on, because it's the oldest philosophical thing in the world, which is don't worry about the things you can't control. Don't worry about the things you can't control. And that may also still be the hardest thing to do.
So true. So true.
Do you find, now I have a question for you. I'm doing a lot of talking here. Okay, because you're a writer also.
Yeah.
Do you find that writing exacerbates the tendency that so many people tend to have, but writing itself exacerbates the tendency to construct chains of events in your head of what might happen based off a single piece of information. So almost like you're constructing a plot in your head.
Sure. Also, I have anxiety, so I call it anxiety brain, which exacerbates all of those things together, right? Of course, we see the chess game 12 steps ahead because that's what we teach ourselves to do, is to write the outcomes and the possible outcomes and which one of those outcomes is what we want for the next outcome. So of course we do. And like you said, I think we just have to balance that, and we have to recognize and be self-aware that we're doing that so that we can stop.
Yeah.
And try not to. I think, like you said, that is incredibly important. That is incredibly
well, and writing tends to attract a lot of naturally introverted, introspective people who already have those tendencies. So my observation among my writer friends is that the profession itself is actually not the greatest for encouraging those healthy habits among the people who have those tendencies. And then if you're spending lots of time isolated, as so many people are, both with their profession, but also now with, self-isolation. What I learned, again, growing up in a rural area and being homeschooled, I had a lot of experience spending a lot of time by myself. And if I can give any advice to anyone over this, it would be, you have to give yourself purpose. You have to give yourself a reason to get up in the morning, a reason to do things, a reason to clean and stay presentable and do things. And that really comes down for me to having large projects, like something that's going to even take me a year or two to do, because darn it, I can focus all my energy on that. And then it really helps with all of that. And of course, if you can manage it, spending time with other people.
Absolutely. We will get into that in just a minute because I have more questions about that. But before I go into that, I want to remind everyone, if you're in the audience watching on Facebook Live or YouTube and you want to ask a question, you will need to either download the festival app, Southern Festival of Books app, or visit the streaming site via the link at www.humtn.org/SFB. Okay, so that said, we will wait for some questions, and I will go into how you have been socializing during isolation. Because I'm like you, I love isolation. Some people don't thrive in it, but I already had my ways set up.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually, it's like nothing has really changed for me in terms of how I live my life. The nearest town for me is a 30-minute drive, and there's nothing but, I'm looking outside right now, there's nothing but fields and cows between and the Yellowstone River between where I live and the nearest town, and the nearest town's like 6,000 people. So, not a whole lot. I do really make an effort though to spend time with my family, after the workday is over, and even during the workday, even a 5-minute break, get up and chat and see what's going on, check on the emails. That's really important.
And have you had like a Zoom community or hang out with friends or anything?
No. I do lots of events like this, but no, I have a friend who does that. She will work with a Zoom call open with some of her friends, but she is an extreme extrovert, and that would, I could not work with hearing other people and seeing other people, especially on the screen. I would find that incredibly distracting. So,
right.
No Zoom group calls like that.
Hey, like you said, it's personal to everybody. This is why this is.
And that's the thing. One of the things I found that actually helped my productivity is there are some websites that do white noise generation, and there's one in particular, and I forget the name of the website, but if you search for this like ambient noise, white noise sort of thing, it has all these sliders, and you can customize the sounds that it'll play, and you can get like low grade coffee shop sound or rain or fireplace crackling, and so if I put that in in a big quiet room, I just put that on, and it's perfect, and I can just go into the zone for writing.
Nice. My aunt was an actress. She used to do those rooms where it's like white noise, and she called them Walla Walla rooms because they don't actually say words. They would just look at each other and say Walla 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 Walla, and that all becomes white noise. It's fascinating.
Strangely enough, it seems to be most of the the women I know who are authors who enjoy working in coffee shops more than the men, like writing in coffee shops. I have no idea why, but that seems to be like the tendency. It's like fewer guys like enjoy working in public with the ambient noise. I don't know why.
Okay, so here are some of my random questions as we wait for some questions from the audience. Are there any Easter eggs for established Bellini fans in your new book?
Well, if you're asking this, I think you know the answer to the question. Yes, there are some Easter eggs. There's one in particular, a rather large one, in To Sleep. I don't want to spoil it for readers.
No spoilers.
If you pay attention, you're gonna definitely see a nice little Easter egg. And there is actually a reason for. My problem is sometimes I get too clever for my own good. And I've been playing a very long game with a whole bunch of story elements. And the only reason that hasn't become more obvious is because, it's taken me so long to publish more books. And despite my publishing record, I'm actually a very fast writer. I have on more than one occasion done 300,000 words in like 3.5 months. So, yeah.
Wow.
So NaNoWriMo, yeah.
I'm so jealous.
But the thing is I can only do that when I'm absolutely rock solid on the outline and the characters. So the rest of the time, like To Sleep took a long time to write because the first draft got on the wrong foot. And I am incredibly persistent, and that actually didn't help me in this case because I finished that first draft when I should have gone back and rethought things early on. And I knew they weren't working. I was like, well, I'll just keep pushing forward. It'll sort itself out. And it didn't. So trying to revise a 300,000 page manuscript and then I don't know. Have you finished the book? Are you partway through?
Are you asking me personally?
Yes, I'm asking you personally.
Yes, I am in the middle of one book and I have to revise another.
Gotcha. So you know how that goes. With To Sleep, everything. So the book is divided into sections, and everything after the first quarter of the second section of the book, I wrote from scratch in the second draft, basically.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's why it took so long, and I spent a year researching the physics too. That was the thing. That was the other thing. I had to figure out the FTL system and make it as well. Because the thing is I knew I wanted FTL because otherwise it takes 1,000 years to get between the stars. And but the problem with faster than light travel is that, according to physics as we know it, if you travel faster than light, you now have a time machine. And making all of my spaceships time machines was just a little bit much for me. So and the thing is, the way most franchises get around, the way most sci-fi stories get around to it is they just ignore it. Or they just hand wave it just a little bit. But usually they just ignore it. And I don't like ignoring things. So I set myself the challenge of finding a system of faster than light travel that didn't contradict physics as we know it, that hadn't been used by some other large franchise, and that didn't allow for time travel. And it was almost impossible. I mean, I read so much. I was talking with scientists and because there are like some realistic FTL solutions, but they've either been used or they all basically allow for time travel. But I ended up finding a guy by the name of Greg Mahalik, who's actually a rocket engineer, and he works on theoretical physics in his spare time, along with some other people. And he and these other people have figured out like this theory of everything almost that no one else has used, and it allows for exactly what I was looking for. So that formed the basis for the FTL. And I want to assure anyone who's watching that, this book is not a it's not a textbook. It's not like I was dumping all this information on the readers. It's the technical stuff, the technobabbles in the back of the book. And if you want to read it, you can, but otherwise you're free to just enjoy the story and you don't have to worry about it.
But it's something you need to do in order to build the world. Yes. Science fiction, you can't just, you could, but most smart authors build an actual planet first. And building a planet is no small feat. Building a universe is
no
feat. So I'm glad you're going to do more.
Well, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend spending a year of research for one novel, like just one novel that you're not going to do any sequels for. I mean, you can, if you have the luxury and the time and you want to do that, fine. But like in terms of, return on your time, so to speak, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you really think it's going to be a bestseller. For me, it was worth it because this is the basis for the setting for many more stories I'm going to tell. So it's that time gets broken up over all those novels, and getting it right at the beginning is
Yes.
incredibly important.
Absolutely. It's why I totally admire science fiction short story writers, because they come up with these worlds for one short story and then they move on. And I'm like, but
Have you read any Jack Vance?
have I read any Jack Vance? I don't think so. If I have, I don't remember it at the moment. There you go.
He's worth reading because I've never really been drawn to his overall plots. They don't really do anything for me, at least the ones I've read. But he is absolutely brilliant because he does exactly what you're talking about, but he'll do it in a sentence. He'll do it in a paragraph. He will create entire civilizations that are fascinating in a paragraph or a sentence, and then he never mentions them again. And he does it all the time. His brain was absolutely amazing. He would just throw off these little gems, left, right, left, right, left, right. And it was absolutely amazing. So he was,
Wonderful.
yeah, it's always fun to find a writer like that.
So are you still, you write so much, do you still have time to read? What are you reading if you have time to read?
I try. I it's really important to read if you're a writer. It helps keep you from getting stale. I did not read enough for the past couple of years because I was so up against the deadlines in the writing, but I've been really getting back into it. So let's see, what have I read recently? Well, last year I read Kings of the Wild, which I rather enjoyed as a fantasy, different take on fantasy. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the conceit is that in this fantasy world, mercenary bands are like rock bands. And so this old band is these old guys, they're getting the band together one last time to go save one of the daughters of one of these guys. And it gets a little heavy on the conceit sometime, but the author had a lot of fun with it. Yeah, it was awesome. I just finished The Road by Cormac McCarthy.
Classic.
Which was a bit like having a bucket over your head and being hammered on for a couple hundred pages. I'm not sure if I like his work. I need to read, I think I want to read No Country for Old Men since I really love the movie. It was interesting experience. Let's put it that way. Interesting experience. And then I'm partway through a reread on Red Rising by Pierce Brown. And I'm reading, I think I have it here with me. One second.
I'm
reading Farnsworth's Classical English Style, which is a book on classical English style and rhetoric. And it's a lot of stuff I'm familiar with, but it's some new stuff for me. And it's nice to have a nice review of some of the technical aspects of writing on occasion.
Fun. Okay. You brought up music. So here's one of my questions. What has been your favorite song this year? Not like of all time, but just this year, because this year I feel like has brought out an entire soundtrack all on its own.
Well, this is easy for me. I am going to cheat in my answer here because the audiobook for To Sleep in a Sea of Stars was read by an amazing voice actress by the name of Jennifer Hale. And some of our viewers may know her. She has done such things as she was the female lead for the Mass Effect games. She has done voices for Halo. She was Galadriel in the Lord of the Rings games. She's been Cinderella for Disney since the 90s. She was, I think she was Carmen Sandiego back in the old animated show. She has the Guinness World Record for most prolific voice actress ever, and she did the voice of the dragon Saphira in the Aragon video game back in the day. So I crossed paths with her back in 2012 at the Supernova convention in Australia and interviewed her, and she was a lovely person, and we chatted a little bit. And anyway, long story short, she ended up reading the audiobook and did a wonderful job. And she is also a very accomplished singer. And so I had got this crazy idea, and she ended up going along with this. She recorded an in-universe song for To Sleep in a Sea of Stars that she and her producing partner, Todd, co-wrote the lyrics, co-wrote the song, and she performed it. And the song is called Sea of Stars. And it is on my YouTube channel. It's on her YouTube channel. It's on Apple Music. It's on Spotify.
Cool.
Just search Sea of Stars, Jennifer Hale, and it's an absolutely lovely song. It brings a tear to my eye every time because it really captures the feel of what I wanted at the end of the book, and then it captures a lot of kind of what the journey was like to actually write the darn thing. So yeah, that's my answer.
What a beautiful thing to come out of this year. I mean, I know this year has been so tough, but there really have been some beautiful moments.
Well, I don't think it's a coincidence that so many pieces of great art came out of World War II and Vietnam and other things. You know, it's the times that try people's souls. So I'm sure we will see lots and lots of books and movies and stories of note coming out of this experience.
And you mentioned video games. Do you play video games?
I do. Do you?
It's a long story, but not currently. I miss them. I miss them a lot. An ex-boyfriend took all my consoles.
Oh, that's horrible.
Short version.
Gotcha. I do. The thing is I have the sort of brain where if I were to play World of Warcraft or EVE Online or Dwarf Fortress or something like that, I would want to be good at it. And so I would never write another book because all of my energy would go into that. So
World of Warcraft is so great. It's so great.
Yeah. So I only really play games that are not that deep. So I like games where things go boom. So I'll play a lot of shooting games. I do love the Mass Effect games. I think especially the first two. I mean, it's the modern Star Wars in a lot of ways for people. And I loved this is going really old school, but the old Myst series, if you're familiar with that. Yeah. They're like the perfect readers video games, you know, because they're all about books and writing and imaginary worlds and the become real worlds. So I love the Myst series. I've been sort of obsessively playing Far Cry 5 over the past, since it came out, because it's set in Montana. And as someone who lives in Montana, I can tell you they perfectly captured the light here.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Good. It feels like here in a lot of ways. You know, if you ignore the whole, you know, insane, crazy cultists who are taking over the world, but yeah. So those are some of the things I play.
Very cool. Okay, one of my other lockdown questions, because many people have been cooking. Do you cook at all?
On occasion, I've been known to make a mean stew because I can just throw everything into a pot and let it boil for 3 or 4 hours.
Nice.
I'm a very utilitarian when it comes to food. I mean, to me, I love food. I love good food, but when it comes to cooking for myself and even others, I'm just like, what's the fastest thing I can do so that I can get back to work? So I can cook up some ground meat. I can do some bread. I can make some salads. I can keep everyone from starving, but I'm not sure you really want to come to me for a gourmet meal.
Okay, noted. I'm gonna write that down too. Great. Okay. Also, what other crazy questions do I have? Okay, what is one place, because you said you have toured a lot and been to a lot of places prior to this year's nonsense. What is one place that you went to that surprised you?
Tasmania.
Do tell.
So I've only been there once, and I was hoping to go there again this year, but of course that didn't happen. But it has some of the oldest rocks in the world, literally the oldest like surface crust in the world. It's incredibly isolated because of how far south it is, but it has about the same population density as Montana, even though it's about half the size of Montana in terms of square kilometers. I don't know. It just had an amazing feel. I would happily live there if it wouldn't take so long to fly everywhere else. The water there, now I was there in the Australian winter, but the water off the coast comes up from Antarctica. There's, the cold currents come up from Antarctica. And I've never seen ocean water like this before. It looked like liquid obsidian. It was black. And it just had this dense look that you don't really get, like if you're in California or somewhere else. Maybe up in like New England or something like that, you'd have a similar look to the water. I haven't really been there on the coast. So it was an amazing place. The people were incredibly nice. The wildlife was quite different. The ravens there have different beaks and their eyes are white. So it's really something.
Oh, how cool. I'm definitely putting that on I'm glad I asked you that. Okay.
So going back to the writing for a second, I have a question for you. Do you outline your stories before you write, or are you more of a pantser?
I'm a combo person. Typically I start off because I have the great idea and I want to go with it. And while I'm inspired and the bug has struck, or whatever the phrase is, I just want to get it all out. And then usually I take a breath and I'm like, okay, now what happens? And then I have to think, because I'm Greek. So I think, if I was sitting at a dinner table telling this story, what would I say next? And then I sort of plot out kind of bullet points, nothing like super detailed. And like you said, the more detailed the plot, the easier the book is to write. So yeah, if I sat down and probably plotted out an entire book, maybe it would be easier to write, or maybe midway through I would go off on a tangent and the rest of the outline would be thrown in the garbage. Yeah. So I don't know. I have yet to do that, but I have found, for me anyway, every single book is different. Every single book is different.
So I actually, the two points there. First one, I actually met Alan Dean Foster one time at Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con. And at the time I met him, he had published somewhere like 120, 140 books.
So cool.
And so I went up to him, and and he's done Star Wars adaptations and all sorts of other stuff.
Aliens,
so, yeah. So I went up to him and I said, Alan, I read your books growing up, really enjoyed them. You've written all these novels. Please tell me, does it ever get any easier? And he stops in the middle of, the thousands of people of Comic-Con, just stops in the middle of the crowd and starts laughing. And he goes, it never gets any easier. He says, I start every book, I'm feeling great. I got the momentum. It's going great. It's going to be awesome. And I get to the middle of the book, and it's like hitting a wall, and I think it's horrible, and I feel like I'm a fraud, and everyone's going to realize I don't know what I'm doing. And then I just keep pushing forward, and somehow I finish the book, and it all works out. And then you do it again for the next book. Well, the other thing I was going to say is, I think what you said about telling the story out loud to other people is incredibly important. I've really become a firm believer over the years that if you can't do that, even theoretically, you don't have to do it, but if you don't have the ability to sit down and narrate your story, tell your story to someone else, you don't actually understand your story. You don't know what your story is. And humans are natural storytelling animals. So if you do that, you will hear the problems in your story. You will figure out, like, just things that work on the page will not work out loud a lot of times.
That's a very good point. Okay, so one last question before we wrap it up. This has been so much fun. Thank you for this. Okay, this is the question I've been waiting to ask. If you were a dragon, what would you hoard?
Oh, books. Books. Because I'm already doing that. It would be books, because I think that they're more valuable than gold. So, and besides, what do you do with the gold? You use it to buy more books. So,
I find this a very, very wise decision.
Now I'm imagining like a giant, like, treasure hoard of books piled up and
I
curled
totally
up.
Want to write a story about a book dragon. You and I should do this thing.
He or she should be like a failed librarian. The dragon who wanted to be a librarian, and they wouldn't accept him. The wizards wouldn't accept him, so he or she had to, start hoarding the books for themselves. Works for me. Works for me.
Let's do it. All right. And now, again, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I really appreciate it.
Absolute blast.
Thank you, virtual audience members and all of our behind-the-scenes staff. Mary, we love you. Thank you, Humanities Tennessee, for inviting me to host. It is an honor, as always. And there's a reminder that Christopher's book may be purchased through the links posted in the chat, or you all can visit Parnassus Books online festival store at parnassusbooks.net/SFB.
And I just want to give a shout out here to how important independent bookstores are. They make all the difference for authors like you and me, and communities in general. And it's easy to say this and to go, oh yeah, you're just saying this, but I've seen it in my own local community. I've seen it in my own personal life. What an impact having these independent stores around has. You discover books you never would discover otherwise. It helps bring people together. So yeah, buy a book. Doesn't have to even be mine. Just support Parnassus and support your other independent bookstores wherever you can. Everyone's having a rough time this year, so even if it's just one book here or one book there, that does make a difference.
Thank you so much.
My